a degree in environmental science. It sounds thrilling on paper, and the $65,000 worth of student debt certainly has a way of luring idealistic young people with dreams of wide-open skies and untamed wilderness. I was one of those people. From the time I could walk, I understood that the natural world made more sense to me than the human one. Trees didn't lie. Rivers didn't judge. Animals didn't pretend. By the time I survived high school, and I use survived loosely, I had written off most of my species entirely. College was a 4-year formality, a toll booth on the road to the life I actually wanted. I was going to be a wilderness ranger, a steward of the deep forest, a guardian of the places most people only ever see on a screensaver. Those were the thoughts filling my head the night before I walked across that graduation stage. 3 years later, those thoughts had been replaced by a low, persistent dread as I sat in my car in the parking lot of a fast food restaurant, staring at the clock until my shift started. The monster that truly kills a man's dreams isn't anything with claws. It's a student loan repayment schedule. For someone who'd spent 4 years studying the migratory patterns of birds, spending 10 hours a day making sandwiches for people who'd sooner bite my head off than say thank you was its own special kind of torture. Every day was identical to the last. Same fluorescent lights, same smell of processed meat and industrial cleaner, same register screen, same headset, same voice saying, "Welcome, what can I get for you?" until the word stopped meaning anything. The only thing that made any of it bearable was Marcus. "Another day, another reason to reconsider everything," he said as I clocked in, not looking up from his phone. "That's the spirit," I replied. Marcus was 26 years old and looked like he'd lived about 40 of them. His skin was pale in the way that suggested he hadn't seen direct sunlight voluntarily in years. His eyes had a permanent glaze to them that could have been exhaustion, substances, or just the natural consequence of working this job long enough. Management kept him off the front counter and on the grill, which suited everyone just fine. He was my only real friend in a 100-mile radius. We worked the night shift together 3 times a week. He talked mostly, conspiracy theories, half-remembered documentaries, things his cousin's roommate had told him with complete confidence. I listened. It was either that or silence, and silence in a place like this was worse. "Eli," he said that night, watching the fryer like it owed him an apology. "Did you know there are animals that science hasn't classified yet? Like hundreds of them, probably." "Cryptozoology, Marcus." "No, man, I mean real ones. In the deep ocean and stuff. Scientists admit it. Your degree should have covered that." "My degree covered a lot of things I'm not currently using." He shot me a look. Not mean, just honest. "So why aren't you using it?" That was the question, wasn't it? I'd been asking it to myself in various forms for 3 years, always arriving at the same vague, unsatisfying answer. Life got complicated. The timing wasn't right. It'll happen eventually. Before I could deflect, our shift manager, a woman named Denise who ran the overnight crew like a corrections officer running a medium security facility, materialized from the back. "This isn't a podcast," she said flatly. "Back to work." We obliged. At 1 a.m, our shift ended and we stepped out into the cold. Marcus, as usual, needed a ride. He lived on the other side of town, and the last bus had stopped running hours ago. I never minded. The drives were the best part of my day. Or night, technically. Real conversation, no customers, no Denise. "Seriously, though," he said halfway through the ride, his voice dropping into something more genuine than his usual rambling. "You studied all this stuff. Wildlife, ecosystems, all of it. And you're making $12 an hour. Doesn't that drive you insane?" "Every day," I said. "So what's stopping you?" I thought about it longer than the question deserved. The honest answer was that somewhere along the way, I'd stopped believing I was the kind of person things worked out for. My dad had passed 2 years earlier. My mom was in a memory care facility in another state, slowly becoming someone I didn't recognize. They'd both encouraged me, pushed me, believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. And when I lost Dad and then effectively lost Mom to her illness, I'd sort of quietly given up. Not dramatically, just gradually, the way a fire goes out when no one tends it. "I don't know," I said. "I think I forgot that I was allowed to try." Marcus was quiet for a moment, which was rare enough that it got my attention. "You should go," he said. "Whatever it is you actually wanted to do, you should just go do it. This place will take everything from you if you let it. It's already taken your ambition. Don't let it take the rest." It was the most coherent thing I'd ever heard him say. I was about to respond when the headlights of a pickup truck filled my windshield. The impact was immediate and absolute. Marcus didn't make it. The physics were brutal and without mercy, and he was gone before I understood what had happened. The other driver, who had spent the evening at a bar on the edge of town, died on impact as well. I was pulled from the wreck with a shattered collarbone, 3 broken ribs, and a punctured lung. I spent 11 days in the hospital. In those 11 days, staring at the ceiling of a recovery ward, I thought about what Marcus had said: "Don't let it take the rest." I applied for a position with the National Park Service from my hospital bed, typing one-handed on a cracked phone screen. The application was barely a page long. I didn't expect a response. 2 days before discharge, one came. The regional NPS office for District 7 was located in Portland, Oregon, despite the district itself covering the remote northeastern corridors of Washington state. I drove there in a used truck I bought with the last of my savings, a 2004 white Ford Ranger with a passenger mirror held on by electrical tape. The interview was in a small, unremarkable office building near the waterfront. My interviewer was a compact, serious woman named Director Calloway, who had the kind of face that suggested she had heard every possible excuse and was not interested in hearing another one. She reviewed my application, asked me several direct questions, and listened to my answers with the expression of someone running calculations. "You mentioned you'd prefer a posting with extended solo periods," she said. "Why?" "People are complicated," I said. "Nature isn't. I understand it better. I work better when I'm not managing social dynamics." She studied me for a moment. "We have one posting in District 7 that matches what you're describing. Remote trail maintenance, northeast quadrant of the Cascades. The position has seen a lot of turnover." "Because of the isolation?" "That's one reason," she said, and left it at that. "The terrain is difficult. The assignment requires self-sufficiency. Your direct supervisor would be stationed 7 miles down the trail." She paused. "Does any of that concern you?" "None of it," I said. She nodded slowly. There was something in her expression that I couldn't quite read. Not reluctance exactly, more like the look of someone who has told someone else not to touch a hot stove and is watching them reach for it anyway. "Welcome to the Park Service, Ranger Cole." She signed my paperwork. A single bead of sweat caught the light on her temple. The nearest town to Post 917 was a place called Dunmore, Washington. Population somewhere around 800, depending on who was counting and whether they were being generous. It had a hardware store, a gas station, a diner, a small library, and a grocery called Valley Mart that was about the size of a large living room. The kind of town where the cashier knows what you're going to buy before you've picked it up. I arrived the evening before my first day and went to Valley Mart for supplies. Sandwich bread, peanut butter, instant oatmeal, a few cans of soup. The woman at the register was ancient in the way that made you wonder if she'd simply always been there. Something geological, like a rock formation with reading glasses. "New Ranger?" she said before I'd introduced myself. "Yeah, how'd you know?" "We only get 2 kinds of strangers around here, hikers and rangers. You don't have the shoes for hiking." She bagged my groceries slowly. "Which post?" 917. Something shifted in her expression. Not fear exactly, more like the careful neutrality of someone choosing their words. "You'll want to take these," she said, pulling a 6-pack of canned beer from under the counter and setting it on the belt. "I appreciate it, but I don't really drink." "It's not for drinking," she said flatly. "Take them." I tried to decline twice more. She didn't budge. I left with the beer. My supervisor, Ranger Dolores Vance, was already at the post when I arrived the next morning. She was in her late 50s, broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and gray hair pulled back tightly. She moved like someone who'd spent decades in terrain that didn't forgive carelessness. She knocked on my truck window at exactly 6 in the morning and told me I had 10 minutes to get into uniform. Her onboarding speech was efficient. This post isn't glamorous. You'll maintain trails in the northwest quadrant, long stretches alone, difficult terrain, limited communication. I expect professional conduct regardless of whether anyone's watching. Keep your radio on and your calls brief. And she paused and her tone shifted into something different, something with more weight to it. The cabin door stays locked from sundown to sunrise. No exceptions. If you hear something outside at night, voices, movement, anything, you do not open the door. What if someone needs help? She looked at me the way someone looks at a question they've answered many times before. Nothing outside that door after dark needs your help. You radio it in and you wait for morning. That's the procedure. I nodded, filing it away. The hike to the trail cabin took most of the morning. The wilderness up there was extraordinary. Old-growth forest, the kind of place that felt genuinely ancient, like it had been there since before anything was named. I felt something release in my chest with every step, the weight I'd been carrying. The job, the grief, the guilt over Marcus. It didn't disappear, but it loosened its grip. I felt for the first time in years like I was in the right place. I also felt, about a mile from the cabin, like I was being watched. Not the pleasant, diffuse sensation of being observed by a curious forest. Something specific, a gaze with intention behind it. I slowed my pace and looked toward the tree line. Thousands of trees, a dense weave of bark and shadow. I stood still and looked until my eyes watered. There, barely visible, far back in the pines, a shape that didn't belong. Dark, angular, just the suggestion of a shoulder behind a birch trunk. As I focused on it, it withdrew, slowly, like it knew exactly how to move without being seen. I kept walking. The cabin was small but well appointed for its setting. My trailmate, a ranger named Owen Blackwood, was on the porch when I arrived. He was tall and lean, with deep-set eyes that held a kind of settled calm I immediately envied. He'd been working this post for 22 years and was due to retire at year's end. "Eli," he said, stepping off the porch to meet me. "That's me. You can drop the formality." "Good man. Come inside. I've got chili on." Owen was quiet in the way that felt restful rather than cold. He didn't fill space with unnecessary words, but when he talked, he said things worth hearing. Over a late lunch of canned chili and crackers, he walked me through the duties, the supply schedule, the trail rotations. "Ranger Vance's rule about the door," I said. "She was pretty serious about it." He nodded, chewing thoughtfully. "A few years back, there were some incidents. Rangers responding to sounds after dark, opening their doors, putting themselves in danger. The procedure now is simple. Door stays locked, radio goes on, you wait for daylight." He looked at me directly. "Follow it, Eli. Your career depends on it. Possibly more than that." "What does that mean?" He set down his spoon. "It means what I said." He let the silence sit for a moment, then moved on. "One more tradition I want to pass on. Whenever you're hiking more than a day from the cabin, you pack a beer." "Why?" He smiled slightly. "Old custom. Goes back generations of rangers at this post. The idea was, if you get badly injured out there, far from help, you have a last drink. Morbid, I know. But it's tradition. Every ranger packs one. It's our way of acknowledging the stakes." I agreed. Something about honoring the custom felt right. Our first trail maintenance run was scheduled for the following Monday. The weekend brought heavy rain that kept us cabin-bound, which I found I didn't mind. I read. I drank tea. I watched the rain move through the pines from the large window. On Saturday afternoon, movement caught my eye. It was out in the trees, moving laterally through the rain. The downpour blurred the details, but the shape was large and dark, moving with a kind of deliberate intelligence. Not the random, instinctive movement of a deer or elk. It crossed between trees efficiently, disappearing behind one and reappearing behind the next, keeping itself just out of full view. Then it went behind a large pine, and it didn't come out the other side. "Owen," I said quietly. He crossed the room to stand beside me at the window. "Something moving out there. Big, dark, went behind that pine and didn't continue." He looked for a long moment, said nothing. Then without comment, he walked to the front door and turned the deadbolt. I watched him do it. "Probably an elk," he said, heading back to the kitchen. "They get disoriented in heavy rain." It moved wrong for an elk. Lots of animals move strangely in the rain. He changed the subject. "Make sure your pack is ready for Monday. Trail's going to be muddy." I listened, but I noticed the door stayed locked for the rest of the day. Monday came bright and cold. Owen placed a beer bottle in each of our packs and radioed Vance to let her know we were heading out. We set off up Trail 9, which climbed steadily through old-growth pine toward a ridge called Carver's Back. The first 10 miles were glorious. The trail was muddy from the rain, but manageable, and the forest after the storm was luminous. Greens so vivid they seemed lit from within, the air thick with the smell of wet earth and pine resin. I was happier than I'd been in years. Around mile 7, we took a break and sat on a fallen log overlooking the valley below. "Hard to believe anyone would want to pave over this," I said. Owen nodded. "People only protect what they understand. Most people don't understand this." He ate quietly for a moment. "My grandmother grew up on a reservation 200 miles north of here. She used to say that the land doesn't need us to protect it. It needs us to remember it. There's a difference." An hour later, we resumed the climb. The final stretch to Carver's Back was steep and slick. And about 3 miles from the summit, Owen's boots lost their grip on a wet stone shelf. He went down hard, and in catching himself, knocked me sideways. We both slid about 8 feet down the trail before a row of embedded roots stopped us. Owen had a gash on his chin and bruised ribs. I had a worse problem. My pack had hit the rocks at exactly the wrong angle, and the beer bottle had shattered. A shard about 3 inches long had punched through the pack fabric and into my thigh. We spent 20 minutes dealing with it. Owen cleaned and bandaged the wound with the first aid kit, while I tried not to make too much noise about it. The shard had missed anything critical, but the cut was deep enough to be a problem. "Suppose neither of us gets our last drink," Owen said, examining his own shattered bottle. "I'd prefer to keep it that way," I said. We pressed on. The summit of Carver's Back rewarded us with a 360-degree view that made the climb worthwhile 10 times over. We set up camp with 2 hours of daylight left, made dinner over a small camp stove, and after the sun went down, Owen built a fire. He was different out here than in the cabin, more alive. The outdoors seemed to restore something in him. He told stories about his early years in the Park Service, about rangers who'd come and gone, about wildlife encounters that strained credibility. He laughed easily and deeply. After a while, he went quiet and stared into the fire, and then in a low voice, he began to sing. A slow, rhythmic song in a language I didn't know. It rose and fell like breathing. When he finished, he sat in silence for a moment. "What was that?" I asked. "A song the elders taught me when I was young, about the relationship between people and the land. It's not a solemn song. It's actually a grateful one. We just don't have the tradition of singing it out here anymore." He smiled. Seemed like the right place for it. "It was beautiful," I said, and I meant it. We talked for another hour about our lives, our regrets, our fears. Owen was the kind of man who made honesty feel safe. I told him about Marcus and the accident, and the way the guilt still lived behind my sternum like a stone I couldn't remove. He listened without trying to fix anything. Around 11, he announced he needed to use the bathroom and stepped away from the fire into the trees. I sat and stared at the flames. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I wasn't immediately concerned. Owen wasn't someone who hurried. But 15 minutes became 20, and I began to feel uneasy. "Owen?" I called. Nothing. I called again. Still nothing. I grabbed my headlamp and stood. His water bottle was on the ground near the fire, which didn't make sense. He would have taken it with him. I walked in the direction he'd gone, sweeping the lamp through the dark between the trees. I found his water bottle, then his pack. Then, from somewhere deeper in the woods, a sound that shut off every thought in my head. Heavy, wet breathing, and under it, a rhythmic smacking, the sound of something eating. Every instinct told me to run. I didn't listen to my instincts. Instead, I turned off my headlamp and moved toward the sound, slowly, silently. 40 yards from camp, in a small clearing around a massive, isolated cedar tree, I saw what was left of Owen Blackwood. I won't describe it in detail. I've tried to, many times, and each time I stop before I finish. What I will say is that what had been Owen was now pinned to the tree, displayed in a way that communicated something like territory. And at the base of the tree, crouched with its back to me, was a thing that should not exist. Even crouching, it was taller than a man. Its body was impossibly thin. Skin stretched over bones with no buffer between them. Every joint and ridge visible like something skeletal wearing a tight gray suit. Its limbs were too long. Its fingers, which ended in something between claws and needles, were a foot longer than fingers should be. Its head was wrong in a way that took a moment to process. Too wide at the temples, too flat at the crown. It was hairless and pale and moving slightly as it fed. I made a sound, some involuntary exhale of horror. The creature stopped. Then it turned its head over its shoulder and looked at me. Its eyes were perfectly round and completely black. Not dark brown, not dark gray. Black the way a void is black, not the absence of light, but the presence of something that eats light. There was intelligence in them and something worse than malice, something playful. We looked at each other. The moment stretched. Then the thing rose. It was easily 8 feet tall when standing. Its jaw opened, too wide, hinged wrong, and it screamed. Not an animal scream, a rage sound, a sound with intention. I turned and ran. I ran expecting to feel those needle claws in my back within seconds. They didn't come. I ran until my lungs gave out. Then I fell to my knees and stayed there, waiting. The thing was behind me. I could feel it. I could hear the slow click of its claws on the pine needle floor, the thick sound of its breathing. It was close, within a foot. I didn't turn around. I don't know what made me understand this instead of the alternative. Something animal and deep. A certainty that turning to look was the wrong move. That looking was what it wanted. I stayed facing forward on my knees, breathing. Then it spoke. The voice was wrong the way a recording is wrong. Recognizable as language, but missing something essential. Like a machine that has learned the sounds of speech without understanding what speech is for. Look at me. I didn't turn. I started to move. Forward, slowly on my hands and knees at first, then rising to a crouch, then a walk, then a slow jog. The thing followed. I could hear it, but it didn't touch me. I made it back to camp. I didn't stop for my pack or my tent. I just ran. The 7 miles back to the cabin took 3 hours in the dark, half running with a leg wound that had reopened from the fall. The creature followed the whole way. I know because I could hear it. Branches, pine needles, the occasional crack of wood. Never closer than 30 feet, never farther than 60. When the cabin lights came into view, it closed the gap. I hit the cabin door running, threw the bolt behind me, and stood with my back against the wood while the thing outside announced itself with a sound that rattled the glass in the windows. Look at me! Over and over, fists against the door, the hinges vibrated. I sat on the floor with my hands over my ears and waited. I tried the radio at 4 a.m. static. I tried again at 6:01. Vans picked up. I told her everything. She went quiet for longer than I was comfortable with. Did you see its eyes? She finally asked. Yes. Another pause. Both of them? Yes. Eli. Her voice was careful and controlled in the way of someone managing bad news. Listen to me. In the desk near the window, right-hand drawer, there's an envelope. Read what's inside. I found it. The envelope was old, the paper inside older. Yellowed, creased, the handwriting cramped and slanted. To whoever finds themselves in this position, there is no good way to say what follows, so I will simply say it. The creature you encountered is called, among those who know of it, the Watcher. It is not an animal in any sense we understand. It is territorial, intelligent, and patient. Its normal behavior is concealment. It follows, it observes, it waits. It has done this for as long as anyone has kept records in these mountains. What you did, making eye contact, has changed the game. The Watcher's identity is built around never being truly seen. You broke something. Now it is not hunting you in the usual sense. It is hunting you specifically because you are evidence of its failure, and it cannot leave evidence. Two things have been found to deter it. The smell of fermented alcohol disrupts it, which is why rangers carry beer. And it cannot pass through a locked door, not by force, not by any means we have observed. This has kept people alive. But if it has your eyes, if it has looked into yours, the alcohol is no longer sufficient. You are its only remaining priority. Stay among people. It will not reveal itself to witnesses. Stay behind locked doors at night. I don't know how to tell you how sorry I am. At the bottom of the page, 4 names had been written in different hands. I found a pen. I wrote my name below them. On the back, in handwriting I didn't recognize, it doesn't end. It only follows. Vance arrived 2 hours later on an ATV. She didn't look at me with pity. She looked at me with the kind of expression reserved for people in circumstances where pity isn't equal to the scale of the thing. "You need to leave," she said simply. "Go somewhere with a lot of people. Stay in the open. Stay indoors at night." I didn't argue. She handed me an envelope. "Emergency fund. Rangers in your situation. And there have been others receive compensation. It's not enough, and I know that. But it's something." She walked me to my truck. At the last moment, she put her hand on my arm. "Owen was one of the best I ever worked with," she said. "I know," I said. She let go. I drove. I'm not going to recount every mile of what followed, not in full detail. It would take too long, and parts of it I'm not certain were real. The dreams blended with the waking hours in ways that are hard to disentangle now. What I can tell you is that the Watcher did not stay in the mountains. It followed me to a rest stop in eastern Oregon, where a man named Gerald Booth came in from the highway and interrupted what would otherwise have been my last morning. I have heard the news reports about Gerald Booth. I was the last person to see him alive. I am not the one who killed him. I crashed my truck in South Dakota after 3 days without meaningful sleep. I walked 4 miles in the pre-dawn dark before a freight train crossing a parallel track gave me something to work with. The Watcher crossed late, the locomotive caught it, and for the first time in days I felt something that resembled breathing space. I didn't know if it would be enough. I suspected it wouldn't. I bought a bus ticket to New York City at a small regional station just after sunrise. I've been in New York for 8 months now. I found a small apartment in a busy part of Brooklyn. 3rd floor, 1 room, locking door. I found a job at a busy coffee shop 2 blocks away, the kind of place that's always loud and always full. I made friends slowly and carefully. A coworker named Dev, who makes me laugh. A neighbor named Rachel, who sometimes brings extra food to my door. Small, careful connections. And I met someone. Her name is Cora. She works at the bookstore on the corner. She's quiet in a way that feels like depth rather than distance. And she has the kind of attention that makes you feel like you've been properly seen for the first time. I've been cautious with her, more cautious than she deserves. I lock my door religiously. I don't let her come to my apartment. I make excuses. She's patient with me about it, more patient than I have any right to expect. 3 nights ago, I was walking home from work, and I felt it. That specific gaze, that weight on the back of my neck. I kept walking. I didn't look. I kept moving toward the crowd, toward the lit windows, toward the sound of the city. I got home. I bolted the door. I sat on the floor with my back against it and waited. Nothing came. But I know it's here. I've known for a while, if I'm honest with myself, the shadow that doesn't match its light source, The sound of breathing in empty rooms, the dreams that feel less like dreams and more like transmissions. It's watching me build something, a life, friends, a routine, something beginning with Cora that I want so badly to protect, I can barely look directly at it, which I understand now is its own kind of dark joke. I'm writing this because I want someone to know the truth about Owen, about Gerald Booth, about any others that come after. And I'm writing this because Cora texted me an hour ago and asked if she could come over tonight. She said she has something she wants to tell me. I don't know what to say back. I know what the smart answer is. I know what the cautious answer is. But I also know that the life the Watcher is trying to take from me, the one it's been slowly dismantling since the moment I looked into those black eyes on a mountainside in Washington, is a life that only matters if there's someone in it. I'm going to lock the door. I'm going to say yes. And I'm going to hope that the lock holds. If you are reading this and something in these woods has found you, if you have felt that specific gaze, that particular weight, if you have heard your name in a voice that doesn't know how language works, listen carefully. Do not go into the deep wilderness alone. Pack the beer. Follow the old customs. They exist for a reason. And whatever you do, whatever you hear, whatever voice calls to you from the dark outside the door, do not look.